My name is Jose Valencia. I'm originally from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I am self-employed presently. I have 3 children who are adults and 1 who is a child. It had an adverse effect on my professional life. Not only can I never, ever again earn a living as a police officer in any agency, nobody will hire me. That's the bottom line. I tried since the day of my termination with the city of Santa Fe. I applied with many places. I couldn't even get a job as a security guard making minimum wage because the city of Santa Fe had me listed as being terminated due to gross misconduct. And a phone call or two and a background investigation would result in whoever I was applying for a job with to alert me that I did not pass background because somebody in the Human Resources Department of the City of Santa Fe identified me as a problem employee. So I couldn't get a job as a security guard, I couldn't get a job as a janitor, I couldn't get a job selling newspapers on the street, nobody would hire me. So it had an adverse effect on my professional life. But keep in mind, it's not over yet. As hard as it's been, it's not over yet. I would still venture to say it's not successful. It's been hard, but they're not successful yet because I'm not done. I still have a lot of truth to tell, and the people who I will expose will go to prison because these guys committed crimes under the color of law, and the American public is reaching a point where they're not going to simply accept that anymore. They used to accept it, not anymore. The American public is going to demand that high-ranking officials and police officers who victimize the public go to prison, especially when they commit high court felonies. So, to be fair, yeah, it appears that they destroyed me, but in reality they did not. I win in the end because I'm going to tell the truth in the story. And once the truth comes out, everyone will see who the real criminals are and who really should be decertified for life. So, despite their greatest efforts, they're still going to lose. It doesn't matter how many lawyers and judges and juries they think they can buy out because they have unlimited resources with tax dollars. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell the truth. End of story. The internal affairs investigation from start to finish lasted almost 2 years, which is a huge violation of the collective bargaining agreement that was in effect, and it even violates state statute under the Police Officers' Bill of Rights. And I was not allowed to defend that or to make issue of that in any of my hearings. In fact, even when I appealed it through district court, it was dismissed, which it surprised me then, doesn't surprise me now. But at any rate, because it lasted 2 years, it caused a lot of stress in my marriage and in my family life, such that it resulted in a divorce. My ex-wife divorced me because my behavior from being so stressed out had changed to such a degree, and I had become so paranoid that life became increasingly difficult for her in dealing with me. It was hard for us to have a conversation. It was hard for me I would refuse to talk about anything important over the phone because I knew I'd already been recorded, and I figured my phones are already tapped by the FBI or whoever had tapped my phones. So it became a very difficult relationship for her to be in with me. And I can't really blame her, I guess, because as a result of the stress that I was under, I made life very difficult on her and my children, such that it resulted in a divorce. And that was a direct result of what the city of Santa Fe enacted upon me. It had a very adverse effect on my 4 children. My 2 older children were in college at the time, and because my income came to an abrupt halt, those young men stepped up to the plate and essentially dropped out of college and got jobs to help me pay the bills so that none of us would end up homeless. They chose to put their college careers on hold to help their father maintain some semblance of stability and normalcy, because we still had a little guy in the house. My youngest son was little then, and young children can be greatly affected by trauma, whether it be emotional or physical. So my older son stepped up to the plate to help their father, and I appreciated that. Meanwhile, the 2 younger children were still in public school. They were both picked on because of all the media coverage that had occurred. They were both picked on incessantly by teachers, by other students, and they were constantly being harassed because their father was quote-unquote a dirty cop who got fired. My older son was attacked by multiple assailants who thought it was their right to try to beat him up because he was the son of a so-called dirty cop. My younger son was verbally attacked by the children in his class and by his own teacher. I'll give you an example. There were a few books that were missing one time in the youngest son's classroom, and the teacher, she suspected that one of the children had stolen it. So she threatened to call the police on the children unless somebody came forward with the dollars that were stolen out of her drawer. And the kids in his class all blamed my son. It must have been him, was their logic, because his dad is a dirty cop. And the teacher in her infinite wisdom, mind you, she's a principal now, the teacher in her infinite wisdom thought that was a good enough reason to pull my son aside and interrogate him. Well, that really upset him to the degree that I had to go pick him up from school. He was so upset about it. And in the end, they did find the child who took it, and it was not my child who took the money. It was another child altogether. However, there was a stigma that was involved because of all the media coverage portraying me as a criminal-minded, dirty cop. In fact, one of my children was actually attacked by members of the Santa Fe Police Department, physically attacked, injured, and harmed, and his civil rights violated by members, 5 members, including a lieutenant and a sergeant on a patrol team of the Santa Fe Police Department.
You don't need it for it. Take it down. Out of the car. Get out of the car right now. Get out of the car right now. Get out of the car. Come on. And third. Get out of the car right now. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Out of the car right now. You can't do this. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car right now. And I said, I'm already past that point. You want to break my arm? Get out of the car. Get out of the car right now. Get out of the car. Get out of the fucking car. Get out. Right now. Get out. Let go of me and I'll get out. Step out. Let's go. Step out. Are you going to fucking jump me? Are you going to jump me? You want to do this? Are you going to jump me? Step out of the car. Get out. I'm not going to put myself through this. Get out of the car. Come here. Sir, get out. Sir, I am telling you. You're making things a lot worse. So you were making it worse. You asked me to step out. Step out. Step out of the car. Sir, step back, sir. I will if you stop what you told me.
And all of it was covered up by Chief Ray Royale and IA investigator Dale Littenberger. They covered it up completely. I never got notification after I made the IA complaint. I never got a disposition, but it's clear to me that those officers faced no disciplinary action because they got promoted. All the officers involved got promoted or were allowed to retire. We're very careful when we travel through the city of Santa Fe because I know there are those who would still love to have any reason to lay hands on me or one of my children. Well, it was a crime. It wasn't an incident. It was an actual crime. They retaliated against him as a witness because he had been identified in my lawsuit as a witness to the illegal entrapment operation that was enacted by the city of Santa Fe and Region 3 and the FBI, State Police. He was a direct witness. He happened to be with me during one of the phone calls, one or more of the phone calls, and he was on my witness list as a witness to crimes committed, and they retaliated against him. And you would think in America, retaliating against a witness would be reason for the Department of Justice to swiftly swoop in and make some arrests and at least do an investigation to some degree. At this point, I did make the report to the U.S. Department of Justice regarding that crime, and at this point, it is at a standstill due to political influence. I have police reports that I made with state police, and I reported embezzlement and fraud and larceny, straight grand larceny, committed by a couple of members of the union who stole. They got caught stealing union dues, union members' dues. And I reported it to state police and it got covered up. I was told by state police officers Jesse Williams and Tim Johnson that I was not authorized by the union to report that crime. Therefore, they were not going to investigate it because the union board had to authorize me. Even though I was president of the union, it was their opinion that the union board had to authorize me to report that crime before they treated it like a crime. So that's one piece of evidence. I also have numerous letters, documents that are dated and signed that I submitted to the chief of police, to the city attorney's office, to the mayor's office, to the city manager's office reporting overtime fraud, criminal misconduct, and widespread civil rights violations. I have all those documents, and I did submit those as part of my discovery in my federal tort claim. I also have the recording that was made. That is the clearest example of tampering with evidence. They finally released that to me, and anybody who has ears and can hear this, it's clear if you listen, you can actually hear the edits. It was a hack job. It's clear they didn't take this to a sound studio because a sound studio would have been harder to detect. You can hear it sounds as if somebody got 2 tape recorders and pressed record on one and play on the other, and then paused and record because you get what's called VSO. It's a sound that's when you wind up and wind down a tape. That's my biggest piece of evidence right there. And I'd be happy to let anybody hear that, because think about this. I was a leader of the union, and I was considered one of the best union representatives because I understood due process and constitutional rights and the rights of others. I was very good at defending people's rights. I was also a police officer, a veteran detective. I understand everything there is to understand with respect to collection of evidence, probable cause, and reasonable suspicion. And they still fabricated evidence against me, knowing that I would very likely defend that and see that it was wrong for them to do that. If they did that to me, they could do it to any of you. And how many American citizens are actually as well versed in their own rights as I was at the time? So keep in mind, that evidence is crucial, and it speaks volumes. It's telling. If they're willing to do that to one of their own, because one of their own crossed the thin blue line and reported police misconduct, imagine what they'll do to somebody who has no clue about their own rights. They will simply victimize the public at will. And it's not that they will, they are. They have been, and they're continuing to do so. When they splice together a tape that makes it seem like you did something wrong, that is no different than them planting drugs on your person or in your vehicle, or getting the blood of a victim to plant in your home to make it seem like you committed a homicide. It's tampering with evidence either way. And believe it or not, here in New Mexico, cops are encouraged to do that to get the conviction. And they're encouraged to do that by their commanders and by the district attorney's office. How do I know? Because I was one of those cops who was encouraged to do that. I simply didn't. If I didn't have the evidence and I lost the case, I lost the case. The evidence wasn't there, I didn't fabricate it. It was that simple. The very first union attorney that I worked with on this, his name was Fred Maurer. He was my attorney at the onset of this incident, this crime that was being committed against me. And I say that term just to bring some light to the fact that it is actually a criminal act. I'm not trying to portray myself as a victim. I'm not trying to make it seem like, poor little me. No, that's not my intent. I'm just stating the facts. What they did to me was criminal. It's a criminal act, and if they can do it to me, they can do it to you. So Fred Maurer was initially my attorney. He was retained by the union to be union attorney. During that time, the union board decided to change attorneys, and then my attorney was David Foster. So David Foster was my attorney during the predetermination hearing and the DPS trials. Well, it was clear that my rights were being violated. And at the time, David Foster advised me, because he was not a civil rights attorney. And he made it clear to me right up front that he was not a civil rights attorney, and it was clear that my civil rights had been violated, particularly my due process rights. He advised me to seek out a civil rights attorney. So I followed his advice and put the word out, started asking associates of mine if they knew a good civil rights attorney. And I was directed to another attorney from an associate of mine who was in the military at the time. He had a cousin of his who had portrayed himself to the family as a civil rights attorney. That gentleman's name was Alvin Garcia. I contacted Alvin, and he continued to portray himself to me as a civil rights attorney, and he took my case. So I retained Alvin, paid him thousands of dollars, essentially depleted what little money I had out of my retirement, because I was confident in the fact that I would win this case. It's a straightforward case of entrapment and civil rights violations. Piece of cake. As it turns out, Alvin fraudulently portrayed himself as a civil rights attorney, and he committed acts of malpractice that would cause anybody to determine that he should not be practicing law, because he made it clear to me that he could handle this case, and then he brought in a partner of his named Charles Lakins, who also portrayed himself as a civil rights attorney to me. As it turns out, neither of them had any experience practicing in federal court. And they went up against, if you were to see the depositions, you'll see the kind of attorneys they went up against. These guys were actually very good at what they did. They are the defense for the city of Santa Fe, and they practice in federal court all the time. Obviously, because the city of Santa Fe has its share of those kind of lawsuits. So this other law firm represents them, and they essentially defeated the arguments of my attorneys who were not at the time and still are not civil rights attorneys, just in the argument phase. And then my attorney, Alvin Garcia, misrepresented me and committed malpractice to such a degree that he and Charles were given sanctions by the federal court for failing to meet deadlines and meeting discovery deadlines and providing information and responding to certain motions and pleadings. So what that did was essentially had an adverse effect on the strength of my case. Turns out, now I discovered that Alvin Garcia is actually very good friends with Gino Zamora, who was city attorney at the time. They went to law school together, and I think they went to St. Michael's High School together. And it seems to me like he actually sabotaged my case as a favor to his old college alumni friend. I don't know, and I don't think I can prove that, but it seems to me that is probably why he did not advise me to get a civil rights attorney the way David Foster did. He should not have portrayed himself as a civil rights attorney to me, and he should not have taken my money. He should have simply referred me to a civil rights attorney, and he chose not to, for whatever reason. I don't know if he needed the money or if he was in on it. And when I talked to him initially during my first consultation, he may have called up Mark Allen and Gino Zamora or whoever he knew at the city of Santa Fe and said, I have this guy here wanting an attorney. What do you guys want me to do? And they may have told him, well, yeah, take the case and then work with us on it. We'll do some damage control. Now, the only reason I say that is because as union president, I was in on many of those closed door meetings with the city attorneys and opposing counsel who were trying to sue the city for whatever police misconduct. I was there representing the police officer. And you'd be amazed how many closed door meetings occur between attorneys. Never sees the inside of a courtroom. The public never knows about it. Nobody ever knows about it. And people's lives their fate is determined between lawyers. Without a judge, without a jury, the fate is determined between lawyers. So I know those closed door meetings and those telephone conversations do happen. And it wouldn't surprise me if some of those meetings and conversations happened between Alvin Garcia and Gino Zamora at the city of Santa Fe. And that's why my lawsuit is in the state it's in now. As it stands, motions were made to dismiss my case. And Alvin never disclosed that to me. That motions were made to completely dismiss my case, and he failed to respond to those motions. I received notification in the mail recently that Judge Judith Herrera approved the motion to dismiss. Well, I had no knowledge of it and no way to respond to that, so now I need to make motions to let her know that I was not aware of that. My attorneys dropped the ball and they committed malpractice, and therefore I need to have an opportunity to respond to those motions for dismissal. So they're trying to get it dismissed, which I think is telling. Because if I was such a dirty cop who committed such horrible acts of misconduct, then why not simply let it go to trial so that the truth be told and everybody see that the city of Santa Fe was right in firing me, and then when it's all said and done, hit me with a bill for everything because it was a frivolous lawsuit. Why work so hard to keep it out of a court of law? Because they know in front of a jury, in a court of law, I win. Because I have the evidence and I have credible witnesses to support the evidence and to support my allegations. This isn't some conspiracy theory that I made up. I have a pretty good imagination, but not such that I could marshal these kind of details, these esoteric and confidential details regarding the inner workings of the city of Santa Fe to make this story up. These are true and actual facts that are supported by evidence and by reliable witness testimony. Other cops, they are very credible. They were eyewitnesses to a lot of this. That's why they are keeping it out of a court of law. That's why the media views my side of the story as not newsworthy. And I've approached them, I've reached out to them, and they refused to cover my story even to the slightest degree. The Albuquerque Journal won't cover my story. The New Mexican won't cover my story. The The Santa Fe Reporter won't cover my story. None of the news affiliates, the channels 7, 4, 13 will cover my story because they don't consider it to be newsworthy. But I'll tell you what, when it was time to destroy my character, that was newsworthy, and they were more than happy, all of those news affiliates, to move and take action to destroy my character and my credibility. Accountability. That's all I hope to gain. It's accountability. I'm not looking for big bucks. I'm not looking to go back and work for the Santa Fe Police Department. I'm not looking for a public apology. I'm not looking for any of that. All I'm looking for is accountability. If you review my case file, you'll see there are approximately 48 to 56 police officers that committed crimes in all of this, and they got away with it. And it wasn't just police officers, it was high-ranking officials. It was city attorneys and mayors and city managers. It was district attorneys. It was judges. Accountability. That's all that I hope to accomplish, is accountability. These people all think they got away with it. They think I'm going away. They think that in the end I'll just give up. I will not stop, ever, until there's some accountability. Until these cops are in prison, whether they're retired or not. So as long as I can accomplish some accountability, I'll be happy. They actually did me a favor by putting me through all this because it's made me stronger. And it's helped me to understand that there's more to life than belonging to a club, because that's what law enforcement at the Santa Fe Police Department is. It's a cryptocracy. It's a secret society. And the things that go on there would shock the public. There was a time, believe it or not, when I was actually in the good graces of the Santa Fe Police Department. I was being groomed to climb the ranks, and I was supposed to become a commander. Now, in order for them to actually select me for that, they had to make sure that I was easy to control, easy to intimidate, and easy to manipulate. And at the onset, they were convinced of that because I wasn't very aggressive with anything. I just simply did what I was told. It wasn't until I began vigorously and aggressively defending the constitutional rights of others that they became concerned. So they sent their feelers out and they tried to intimidate me, they tried to manipulate me, and then they found that I am impossible to manipulate and impossible to control, especially when it comes to somebody being victimized. I'll give you a quick example. Because I was a crimes against children detective, we worked very closely with other agencies who investigate child abuse. And sometimes these agencies are not law enforcement. They're simply other government agencies who investigate these reports. Now, it was a common trend when I first became a detective for these other agencies to contact crimes against children detective and say, we need for you to go with us to do a home visit. And it was common practice for the detective to go, flash a badge, and demand to be let in. Without a search warrant, without asking consent, simply barge right into somebody's home and allow these other people to search their house and take their kids away and just victimize the public. So that way, these other people would be able to justify the existence of their job. Otherwise, there'd be no reason for them to have a job if they didn't take people's kids away. So once I realized that that was a huge civil rights violation and that was a disservice to the public, I stopped doing that. And these other agencies stopped calling me to go with them to home visits because I would go with them. And the first thing I would do is I'd knock on the door, I would identify myself, and I would tell the person right away that they do not have to let us in their home without a search warrant. And we would ask consent respectfully, but by no means did we have probable cause sufficient enough to enter their home or to believe that a crime had been committed. And these other agents would have a fit because I would educate people on their constitutional rights right at the front door. And they complained to the chief, and they complained to my captain. And as a result, I was no longer allowed to go on these home visits. And I was talked to repeatedly. I was brought into closed-door meetings where I was told that is counter to police operations. It is counterproductive to police investigations. And I would argue that it is not counterproductive. It's actually what we're supposed to be doing as police officers. We're supposed to be protecting the constitutional rights of everybody. That was not well received. And I was threatened with discipline and reassignment. And by then I was, in the union. So I would say, do it. If you think you can discipline me for that, you go right ahead and I'll see you in predetermination hearing. Well, as it turned out, it never happened. The last incident of which was when my commander was Jason Wagner, a very good friend of mine. I thought he was a good friend at the time. He gave me a direct order to take custody of a child based on the account of an agent who was not law enforcement, who was part of another investigative agency. And I explained to Sergeant Wagner that I was not going to take custody of anybody's children unless I had established probable cause to believe that that child had been a victim of a crime, or that the person I was taking custody from had committed a crime. To which he threatened me with disciplinary action if I didn't do it immediately, because he was giving me a lawful order. Then I explained to him that that order was in fact not lawful. It was actually an unlawful order, and I showed him in policy that I did not have to obey any orders that were not lawful. And I encouraged him to please begin with his disciplinary process, because it would be easy for me to beat that in a predetermination hearing and then have him subsequently disciplined for failing to properly supervise. Well, that was not well received. Turns out, my good buddy Jason Wagner happened to be part of the crew that set me up in this entrapment operation. He was in on it. So, I guess that's what happens when you decide to tell the truth. No, they are not. Again, I was following the advice of my former attorney, Alvin Garcia, who advised me that it would not be appropriate for me to include all these agencies on this tort claim. And I believed him, because I'm not an attorney, and he portrayed himself to me as a civil rights attorney who was well versed in these kind of things. So I believed him and I went with his advice. As it turned out, he never filed any of those lawsuits, and I thought he was working on them. He led me to believe that that was the next step. He never worked 1 minute on any of them. In fact, he worked harder to cover all of those up than anything, making sure that I would miss potential deadlines. But it doesn't matter. I still reserve the right to file suit because I have a malpractice claim against Alvin Garcia, and I still have a complaint to the State Bar Association regarding his conduct with me. He should not have portrayed himself as a civil rights attorney when he had no idea. It was interesting how I had to fire him. Originally, I wanted for him to represent my son, the one who was attacked by the Santa Fe Police Department. And he agreed to me that he would represent my child, but he never did anything. He purposely and intentionally did not file a lawsuit. So my son, who was a minor at the onset, became an adult, and he, unbeknownst to me, he hired his own attorney. And I had nothing to do with that. He did that on his own. And then it came out in the newspaper that his attorney had filed suit. So Alvin called me up, once again, to accuse me of what he had been doing. He called me up to accuse me of having betrayed and deceived him, because my son, who was now an adult and could pretty much do whatever he wanted, hire his own attorney, had found another attorney. And that's when I knew that Alvin had in fact deceived me and betrayed me, because he accused me of that. And that's common for suspects. They love to deflect and accuse others of what they are doing. And plus I had other evidence. He had missed deadlines. He allowed motions to get dismissed. He'd done so much, and his excuse was that he simply forgot or didn't have time or what have you. He acted as though he was incompetent and not sabotaging my case. Now I believe he intentionally sabotaged it. At any rate, he is no longer my attorney. I fired him after that conversation, and him and Charles. I fired them both, because I had reason to believe then that they did not have my best interest or the best interest of my family at the root of their motivations. And so I started to seek replacement for him, which is a whole other story. Despite my best efforts, no civil rights attorney in New Mexico wants to represent me. I reached out to, I think I'm on number 14 now, trying to retain a civil rights attorney. And at first, they get my case file and they're very excited, and they tell me it's a win-win case and there's no way we could lose. And even if a judge rules against us at this level, they'd win on appeal and then we could come back. And it's full of promise. And so they review my case for a couple of weeks, make a couple of phone calls to the defense, and then all of a sudden I receive a phone call, an email, or a letter telling me that they can no longer help me, and they don't want to tell me why. And in fact, one of the first attorneys, and I'm not going to say his name, but one of the first attorneys that I tried to retain to help me became very aggressive about me going to pick up my file. He sent me emails and phone calls and told me to please come and pick up my file. He can't help me. So when I got there to pick up my file, I asked him what the problem was, why the urgency for me to pick up the file. And he said to me, and I quote, I don't like being threatened. Get your file and leave. To which I responded, I've never threatened you. And he says, I'm not talking about you. So that led me to believe that every time I try to retain an attorney, somebody's threatening them. And that's why I can't find an attorney to represent me. It has nothing to do with the merits of my case. It has to do with the political influence that the city of Santa Fe has over just about every civil rights attorney. Even in Texas, I tried to retain attorneys in Texas, Colorado, California, as far away as, I believe, Louisiana. One attorney said that they were licensed to practice civil rights law in New Mexico, reviewed my case for 2 weeks, and then said, sorry, I can't help you. When I asked why, they would not say why, simply that they could not help me, and good luck with my case. So right now, I am forced to represent myself, which, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to throw in the towel just because attorneys won't refuse to represent me. I'll continue to do whatever I can. I, by no means, am no equal to an attorney, but I'll tell you what, I don't quit and I don't give up. And if I have to research it and figure out how to respond to pleadings and how to respond to motions for dismissal, I'll figure out a way to do it one way or another. I was a pretty good police officer, and I understand legal jargon, and I understand how to read a contract, and I understand how to make motions and tentative agreements. So I'm not completely out of my element. I simply don't have the college education required to practice civil rights law. But it's okay. I'll learn. Hopefully, I'll find an attorney who's not afraid or intimidated. I have a couple of more people that I can call to ask for their help. And hopefully I'll have an attorney soon who can represent me in this tort claim and others, because there are others coming. I haven't forgotten about the other agencies that were involved. And if they think that they're going to get it dismissed because I missed these so-called deadlines, all they need to do is review case law. When someone is precluded from filing a case in a timely manner because of malpractice, they get a restart. So if they think they're safe because time has passed, they're in for a rude awakening. I'm not going away anytime soon, and I'm not going to quit. Right is right, and wrong is wrong. It's that simple. I think the American public would appreciate that now, in light of what's going on in our country. People don't like to be lied to anymore, especially if they become victims of a system and a police force that are going to lie about what has happened. The only thing I would like to add is, contrary to popular belief, I don't hate cops. I don't have an agenda to besmear and commit character assassination on police in general. I was a police officer for 10 years, and during that time, I demonstrated to police officers, even in other agencies, that I was very loyal to law enforcement. Now, keep in mind, I was loyal to the good cops, and I understand there is a sentiment now in the American public such that there's no such thing as a good cop. Well, I'm here to tell you there is. It's like an endangered species, and you very seldom see one. But there are good cops out there. I know probably 2 in the city of Santa Fe Police Department. And that's only because I don't know all the cops that are there now, but I know 2 that are still there. And these 2 police officers make the constitutional rights of citizens paramount in what they do every day. That is what the American public deserves. Now, I'm not here to pitch a sale of, please write to the city so that they'll bring me back as a cop. That's not what I'm here to do. I am simply here to educate the citizens, to let them know cops are not allowed to plant evidence on you or fabricate evidence. That is against the law. It is a felony. Cops are not allowed to search you without probable cause or a search warrant or your consent. Cops are not allowed to lay hands on you because they think they smelled something or saw something, or because they had a hunch. They're not allowed to hurt you. They're not allowed to victimize you. And they're not allowed, or should not be allowed, to use the defense of qualified immunity to get away with all of this. That is the whole point of all of this, is I want the public to understand you are not at the mercy of police officers. They work for the public. They are public servants. And once they understand what their job is, then they will be the heroes of society. But until then, they are nothing more than thugs. And you do not have to accept that. You do not have to accept that victimization mindset. You can reject that. And I'm not saying to start a revolution. I'm just saying the revolution starts in your mind. It starts in your conscious decision to say, I will not ever be a victim. Once you make that decision, you'll understand you're never alone. You're never alone in this world. But the first step is to understand and decide you're not a victim and you don't have to be a victim. So that's how I would like to end this, with just keep in mind there's always hope, and there's always a way to change it. And the best thing to do is don't dwell on something bad that happened. Learn from it, press on. Don't let them get away with it, but don't despair, and don't become a vigilante either. Just keep that mind pattern that you hold people accountable, even to the slightest degree. That's all I got to say about that.